decentralized autonomous organizations and very modern and internet native ways to organize. Now, we've been on this journey and have been joined by a number of very interesting and very knowledgeable people. One of our students currently, I must say, is Leo. Welcome, Leo.
Hey guys.
Um, Leo has a lot of practical experience with Futarchy, and so does Not Your Handle. Welcome to the pod or to the live stream. Very nice to have you here. Yeah, and as part of our exploration in the past weeks of different forms of governance, collaboration, and community, we really bumped into this future forward concept of Futarchy, which apparently has been around already for more than 20 years, at least in theory. And we're very much looking forward to dive a little deeper into that. So, welcome everybody. Nice to have you here, and yeah, let's get it started. So, maybe it would be nice, Leo, Not Your Handle, to share a bit about yourself and also how you fell into this whole rabbit hole of Futarchy. And then after that, we'll dive into what it actually is.
Sure, I'll start,
Yes.
and then I'll hand it over. So yeah, I learned about Futarchy last, maybe 2 years ago now, at a conference called Athens DAO, which is a DAO conference for mostly participants in the Solana ecosystem. But I met someone who was implementing this system, Futarchy, which we can discuss a little bit more about, in a DAO on Solana. And he was pretty brilliant, and he explained to me how the system worked. And then I started contributing to the DAO. And what's cool about being a contributor in a Futarchic DAO or a Futarchic system is you're typically a trader or maybe a gambler or a bettor. And so as a person who's excited about prediction markets and markets in general, it was a really cool way for me to participate in a DAO just by placing bets on my beliefs. And yeah, and then most recently I met Not Your Handle at at MCon in Detroit, and he was also working on Futarchy on the Ethereum side of things, and he told me all about his implementation and what they were working on, and so I'll kind of let him take the reins and tell him a little bit about himself.
Of course, and yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Leo. Thanks for inviting me, Gideon and Gar. So I'll rewind slightly. We started Butter, where I'm one of the co-founders. I also have another co-founder called Lajar. And we were really interested in the problem of governance. And to make this explicit, it was, how do you govern? How do a group of people, a large group of people who know each other over the internet, basically don't know anything about each other, they're just random accounts, right? How do they make collective decisions? And in crypto, we've tried a whole bunch of different things, and we've kind of settled on this model of holding tokens, which represent some potential financial upside in the collective, the collective group, and being able to use those tokens to make decisions or vote on decisions. So really, it's just a vote. So we're all going to vote on whether we should do something, and then we're going to weight the vote by how much of the total supply of this token we own. Really simple. We've used voting systems for ages. Most people know how they work. What we've found since we've been running this experiment with DAOs is that we have some problems. We have some failings, and that's because these systems, they really, all they do is they ask people for a signal about what they prefer. And people turn up, and if they have lots and lots and lots of these tokens, they have a large share of it, they get to influence that like kind of disproportionately. And you could say that that's metered by the amount of the total supply they own. Like if they have a large amount and they make a bad decision, then hopefully they'll get punished, right? Because the thing will lose some value. And this is kind of keeping the whole system afloat. That's what we're running all of this on. Protocol governance has these 4 components. It has kind of, how do we decide how to upgrade the software? How do we decide, and this is like protocol upgrades, it has types of decisions that are about how do we change parameters in the code itself. Like if it's a lending protocol, we may want to change a particular risk parameter, for example. We also want to make some decisions around like soft policies, like how do we agree what is allowable and not allowable in our ecosystem. For example, we want to make upgrades via an EIP, an improvement proposal process. how do we decide to make changes to that, right? This is kind of policy. And then finally, we have some resources that we may or may not want to distribute to different people, right? And governance is trying to keep all of that going in the same direction all the time. And if you have an infinite number of anonymous people over the internet who are integrating with the system and buying tokens and making decisions, this gets really problematic to manage. Futarchy, and this is the amazing part, is it offers another way of aggregating information from that same group. So the same group could vote on something, should we do X or Y, and the same group could use Futarchy and basically place a bet. They could say, I bet that this is going to produce a better outcome for us as a group than doing this, right, A or B. And the difference should be that you can kind of, I like to say that with a normal vote, you can never really tell if someone's going to be better off if they make a particular decision. The only thing you can guarantee is that they're going to make a decision that's absolutely in their interest, right? So you have an unknown sense of who is likely to benefit from the decision, but everybody gets to contribute based on their vote. And in a Futarchy, you can kind of design the actual upside and downside that people get when they participate in that decision. So what Robin Hanson, who's the inventor of Futarchy, says is, markets are great information aggregators. If you have some information that you think can influence a decision, you are incentivized to sell that information to the market and thereby move the price and then give everybody that information. And this is like why Futarchy is potentially a great solution to this problem of how you get a large group of people who don't know each other over the internet to make collective decisions that are in their collective benefit.
Wow. There is a lot of to unpack. So I think like people understand, or I understand. I said people, but I meant what voting is with tokens. So you have like some amount of tokens. If I have, let's say, 100 tokens, you have just 10 tokens. I probably beat you on the decision because I have 10 times more voting power. And that's the one token, one vote design. Probably we also understand one person, one vote, which is like the traditional, like I would say, Web2, like government type of style of governance. And now we are saying we are going to bet on things. How that actually works? Let's like take a step back. Like, what is actually happening? Like, are those like proposals going up the same way? Like, let's say we are voting for individual to be like the representative. I think that's like easy example, or the funds being distributed. Like, is the proposals at the beginning going the same way in Futarchy?
Yeah, I'll. So there's a couple of. I think it can get pretty confusing because there's like a couple of implementations of Futarchy, but to like keep it really simple, I think what excites me about Futarchy is that it makes an assumption that current governance isn't optimized, or current governance systems aren't optimized. Whether you're using a democracy, a holacracy, maybe a republic, or some delegate program of some sort, it says that those systems aren't working and that they are broken. Or at least that's what MetaDAO believes. And they believe that they have this alternative approach in Futarchy. And what MetaDAO asserts is that the best information aggregators and the best decision-making systems is through markets, because you're betting, and I keep citing this, but the thing that Robin Hanson proposed was, in his original paper, was bet on your beliefs and vote on values. And so everyone in their own self-interest is incentivized to bet on what they think they believe. And the hope is that if everyone's acting in their own self-interest and trading these markets, then eventually the market will come to the decision that's best for the organization. And so in that way, it's incentivizing everyone to participate, which might be a better way to do governance than like traditional systems that we've seen. That's kind of my high-level overview of it and why it works. And then I think we can kind of maybe talk about how it's implemented in certain DAOs later. Did I miss anything there, though?
Well, I think that the thing that you're talking about is implementation, but I think if we just stay at the abstract level, then the answer is like a firm yes. Like anything that you could technically want to decide, right, with a proposal, you can absolutely decide with a Futarchy. And this is why, because a proposal is a proposal to make a change. And someone could say, right, I think we should make a change. We should go from this state to this new state, right? We're going to change the code from this version to like version 2 and ask everybody what they think. And the question is, why would we decide to make the proposal? Why would we decide to incorporate the proposal and make the change? We want to go from V1 to V2 because we must believe V2 is better for us, right? Collectively. So when we ask ourselves, should we go from V1 to V2? We hope that everybody agrees it's all in everybody's collective interest to go from V1 to V2. Now you could take the same proposal and you could go to Futarchy, and again, Futarchy is just a way of trying to answer the same question. You're trying to predict, you're trying to use this idea that you can predict, you can get some information from everybody about what they actually believe about the future, and they can use it to make a decision. So we ask everyone, if we move from V1 to V2, do you think this is going to be better for us or worse? People will, they get into the markets and they kind of build these positions. The positions like aggregate all of the information from everybody in the markets. And at the end, we know collectively what everybody thinks. And the difference between the vote and the Futarchy is that in the vote, they've given us some signal of their preferences that are in their interests, but we don't know what their interests are. The example I like to use is someone could be a huge Ethereum holder, so it's in their interest to do things that are good for Ethereum. They could have double a size in Solana. And so they might be doing things that are more in their interest because their Solana bags are bigger. And so this is, you can't really tell what people's actual exposure is, right? So you don't know what their interests are. But here we can design this system that says you have some skin in the game in the decision. If you actually, it's not in your interest to give an incorrect answer to this question of whether you think it's better for the people in the ecosystem for you to make the decision to move from V1 to V2. And that's what Futarchy gives you. So even though these are asking the same questions, you're actually getting different information from the people who participate.
Right. So there's a difference clearly between voting as a signal of interest or a signal of approval versus actually putting money into a certain option, which would more clearly signal what is better for the whole or the community, right? That's the assumption. Now, before we go into, so I hear a lot of examples from the crypto and software space. Before we go further into implementation, maybe it's good to kind of go back to first principles about the bigger vision here, right? So Futarchy was designed as a system even before crypto existed. So what is this original vision, and especially what are the domains within the world that the creator of Futarchy imagined that it would work with, right? So are we talking governments? Are we talking companies? What can be the impact of this system?
I'm happy to jump in here. So the creator, inventor is Robin Hanson, and the first Futarchy paper, I believe, was actually published in 2000. So we are a good 25 years on from then, and Futarchy has had multiple kind of implementations and deployments. It's kind of varying degrees, and it's been used for a whole bunch of things. I think some of these things are normally not public. They are like private tests, people trying different things. Some of them are very large, some of them are very small. But when Robin actually developed this, he kind of started from somewhere a lot simpler, which is thinking about just the power of markets as an information aggregation mechanism. And one of the things that people always push back on is they say, yeah, markets are great at aggregating information, but they have all these flaws, right? And they can very much become biased and they're manipulable. But what's interesting is they're very, very useful because we use them all the time. And they tend to perform, right? They perform all the time. So we actually reference markets and everything. We reference prices, and they have this property, plus they're very composable, they are very scalable, and most people understand how they work. So you're starting from there, And then he's saying we could use this to aggregate information about all kinds of things where they don't suffer the bias of political systems. When we have a political system and we try to aggregate information, people are incentivized to vote politically, to vote strategically. And markets kind of, for the most part, they kind of don't have this property, right? They're biased in different ways, but they don't have this property. So this is where he starts, and he starts out just with this idea of decision markets, right? So you could use this to make decisions, and then he starts to apply them to different use cases. And one of the most important ones is this politics, right? It's policy. And so he doesn't start in crypto with DAOs. He starts with democracy. He's like, imagine you had like a politician, and they're campaigning and they're saying they're going to do all of these things. They're like, we're gonna abolish this, and we're going to build this, and we're going to get rid of poverty, and we're going to do all these things, and they sell you this dream. And then everybody agrees on the dream. They're like, yeah, the dream, perfect, I'll vote for you. They put them in, and then they start to consult experts about what they should do. And everybody says, just take this this policy and implement it, and you will get this goal. And Robin's basically saying that most people would probably agree that that's a bad idea, but the politicians tend to do it anyway because it's politically expedient for them to do this. Like, politics is what decides which policy they pick. And so he says, at that point, once we know what we want, we should stop relying on the politicians and instead rely on markets, because markets will tell us how to get what we want. Markets won't lie. They'll say, if I can put some skin in the game on the decision, and I get rewarded if I'm correct, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think is going to maximize my payoff. That's the kind of thing right at the core. And if I buy the outcome I think is most likely to happen, right, because I think it's going to happen, I'm going to push the price up, and then we're going to learn. Like, the market's going to learn. It's going to communicate to everybody exactly what most people think. So this is one of the use cases, is actually making decisions at the government level. Now, Robin has loads of other ones, like corporate governance. So the example he always gives is firing the CEO. So you run these markets, and they're trying to predict the price of some stock if you were to fire the CEO, and it gives you a fairly good signal as to whether you should do it, and maybe you should implement the decision. He has hiring markets, so you should have a same market running on new hires, and so it's telling you whether, if you hire some person, if they're going to actually impact the business in some way. And so he has this idea, and there are loads. You can think about all kinds of decisions that are hard to do because they have some bias in some way, where a market's likely to give you a better outcome. And then you could try and make the decision that way. The difficulty with Futarchy is never that the ideas themselves aren't good, but the actual adoption and implementation is just hard.
Yeah.
Well, should we run this at our course? Like, should we fire the teachers or keep them there? I'm not sure, Gideon, if we will survive.
I'm open to it.
We'll see what
Can I
markets say.
secretly? I'd love to buy my own existence as a teacher.
We're in the market betting hard.
Yeah, maybe the course will be better without it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, in your example, Gideon, you could theoretically try to manipulate the market by purchasing a lot of shares and to keep Gideon on as CEO. But what's so cool about markets is that if people disagree with that, then you will lose a lot of money. And so it's much more difficult to manipulate markets than it might be to manipulate politics, for example, because you're in a position of power as the teacher, and so you can theoretically manipulate that vote by exerting your power or influence over them.
But then it comes down to how many people are in the course and how rich are they, right? So, am I correct?
I think
So
the world comes down to that at the end of the day, though. And Futarchy makes no. I think it's kind of cool because it removes that veil, right? Like, politics right now are influenced by lobbyists. Maybe not, but that's kind of like my view. And so I think Futarchy kind of removes that Machiavellian nature and says, this is what it is, and markets are just more efficient, and so let them decide. And maybe it does disenfranchise certain people, but I'd love to hear what Nair Handel has to say about that.
All I was going to say is I think that the idea is that you could, and this is talking about money, right? You don't necessarily need it to be money per se. So there are good examples of Futarchys that run with just like reputation, or you're giving people some money to make a bet. And there's a really good set of papers by Google where they ran these internally for a long time, and people were just using like play money, and it still worked. So, but you can think about it as, if you are willing to put something at stake to say, like to create a position that you believe is actually not true, doesn't match reality, at some point in the future, reality will happen and you'll lose money, right? And up until that point in time, right, because the winning position is somewhere else, every single person in the market, you basically put up a beacon that said, hey, come and take my money. I have some stake. It's probably in the wrong place, and anyone can come and take the money. So you're going to have to keep funding that position to kind of keep you off, keep the whole market in that position that you want it to be in order to influence the decision, i.e. you don't get fired. So this is what the idea is. Like, you can, you won't stay solvent for very long if you're trying to just manipulate these markets, because there's more of them than there are of you. Unless you're like the richest person in the world and you just want to burn a whole bunch of money.
Right.
Those people exist.
Yeah, and so, well, it's interesting when it comes down to the actual practice and implementation, right? And this is what you hinted at. And I've been looking around a little, right? So you guys are, or Leah, I at least know from you that you're also involved in MetaDAO, right? So this is a Futarchy itself, but it also is a platform, if I read this correctly, for other DAOs and organizations to work with Futarchic proposals or do their own Futarchy governance. So just going through the proposals that you can see on the MetaDAO platform, just to name one, there is the website redesign, right? So there's a DAO that wants to redesign its website. I believe there's about 3.5K involved in this website renovation, and then people start betting on it. And I saw the actual graph of that, which is kind of interesting. And it passed, and if I read this correctly, there was more than 300K kind of flowing through this vote on both on the pass and on the field side. So that's 100x what is at stake, which is 3.5K. And I find that fascinating, right? Because I can completely imagine someone bringing a very good faith effort and proposal, which I thought this was. It's very well described of what a new website would achieve. And then suddenly there's this chaos of the market almost, as I would imagine it, right? Everybody is starting to pile in money for what is basically a very simple and hopefully very pragmatic proposal to improve a website, right? So just the taste of that a good faith effort to improve something can become subject to the forces of a wild betting game feels a bit weird for me as an organizational consultant and designer. So just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, it's really unique, right? And something that's fascinating that I've kind of noticed is there's a lot less proposals, and the proposals that are brought forward are really high quality because they are under the veil of traders. And so I really do nothing in MetaDAO besides talk in the Discord and then trade, and that makes me a member. And I'm incentivized to trade because I want my meta tokens to go up, and I make no mistake about that. I'm financially aligned with Meta, the token that lets me participate in MetaDAO's governance. And so Meta, actually, a cool kind of thought experiment is Meta decided to, through a proposal and through markets, decided to basically appoint 2 people as like CEOs of MetaDAO. We call them benevolent dictators. And these CEOs have worked with companies. If you look at our 2 most recent proposals, one is with ISC, which is like a stable coin on Solana, and then the other one was with the investment research firm. And both CEOs worked with these companies and tried to basically wanted these proposals to pass. And the market and the members and the traders actually failed them. And that was completely against what the CEOs wanted, or what the benevolent dictators, which were elected by Futarchy in the first place, had wanted to happen. And so it's pretty cool, in my opinion, that Futarchy exists. Now, you do bring up a good point in that in a system like MetaDAO, maybe there are smaller proposals that should be made by CEOs that should not be brought to the actual governance platform. And maybe that's kind of why the benevolent dictator proposal passed, because the community recognized the need for that. So that's another kind of instance, I think, of markets working, is that we recognize that smaller proposals might not need to be done through the DAO and through Futarchy, and so we can pass the benevolent dictators. And then for large proposals, the benevolent dictators have to consult with the traders, as they're called.
Interesting. Yeah, so one more thing on this specific vote. What is very interesting, and I believe that kind of works within this whole concept of, betting your beliefs, is that it's just a bet. So if there's a proposal, there's no discussion. At least it was not visible to me. Maybe it's somewhere in the Discord, but it seems to be just a bet, and I think that is probably for purposes of maybe clarity or having a pure market at work. Is that true? And is it really beneficial to good governance to not have a discussion but just put your money in?
So there is discussion in the Discord around the proposals. The last one was pretty heated. But to your point, there have been proposals by other firms, outside firms, that didn't seek to get the input from traders in the Discord and pushed through a proposal, and traders were not happy with that and didn't pass the proposal. And they had said after the trading was done, if you had come to the Discord and maybe worked on proposal workshopping with us, then your proposal might have had a better chance of passing. So I think in a system like Futarchy, getting a lot of feedback is really important, especially because the stakeholders are financially incentivized to participate.
Yeah, so I have a question, actually, pretty practical there. Like, just to not assume, like, if I understand correctly, like, if I have a proposal, I bet one side or the other, correct? It's like a football, basically. Like, I bet they win or they lose. And if I'm on the losing side, I lose all the tokens I put in. Is that correct?
No, unfortunately not. I wish it was that simple in MetaDAO. In
Okay.
MetaDAO, it's conditional tokens. And so if I bet and my side fails, I receive USDC. If I bet and my side wins, I win Meta at the price at which I purchased it. So it's conditional decision markets. So it's a little bit more confusing than prediction markets, which is a little easier. And then the last thing I'll say is proposals in MetaDAO need liquidity, and typically the proposer needs to provide that liquidity. MetaDAO is subsidizing proposers that want to bring forward a proposal, so they don't need to supplement their own liquidity. But in a true, I think, implementation of MetaDAO, they would have to supplement their own liquidity.
Is that everywhere the same? Maybe in a triangle. Do you see some different implementations of it?
100%. Yeah, as Leo said, there's various implementations. So one of the things that we're doing is we're obviously not a broad Futarchy. We're building something called conditional funding, and so that means that we're trying to figure out if we were to allocate. So if an ecosystem is trying to figure out how to allocate grants, right, to fund public goods, one of the problems with funding public goods is that typically you would give the funds to some grants manager, and you'd say, please just distribute this capital so that our ecosystem can get funded and we can build things that are useful and everyone has public goods. Great. Now this works really well, but as you start to scale and the amounts get larger, you realize that your great grants manager who's distributing capital could now be the bias, right? They can start to think, well, let me just I like this person, let me give them some money. I like that person, let me give them some money. And eventually you find that you're not funding ecosystem goods, you're really just funding, grants manager goods, like things that benefit the grants manager. bias creeps in. And so we really wanted to solve this public goods problem, and the way that we want to do that is using Futarchy. And specifically, we're using scalar markets. So, a good way to think about this is prediction markets ask people to predict whether something, not always, but like something is yes or no. So with MetaDAO, it's like, should we pass a proposal, yes or no? Similar to, should we vote yes or no on a vote? What we're doing is we're asking people to predict if you fund this project, right? If you distribute some funding to this project from a public goods perspective, are they going to achieve some metric that the whole ecosystem cares about? So a good example of this, or a way of thinking about it, is like retro funding. So retro funding will say, right, we gave money to nobody, and we let teams just build on our ecosystem or work in our ecosystem. And then we got to a particular point in time, and we retroactively looked back at what they'd achieved, and we look at the metrics, and we decide which metrics we care about. So we really care about the number of developers you brought into the ecosystem. And so then we reward people or projects proportionally based on the amount of good they do for the ecosystem. And so this is retro, it's been working for years, pioneered by Optimism, obviously. And what we're trying to do is exactly the same thing, but we want to do it like forward-looking. So we want to kind of figure out what do we think is going to be in our interest, pick a metric, and then give the people the money up front, give the projects money up front, and let them do the work. If we're waiting for teams to do it first, we're relying on them securing some other form of funding first to do the work, right? So that means there's a significant number of these great projects that could create so much good for the ecosystem that just aren't being funded. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to like fill that gap that we have in our grants infrastructure. And so what we ask people to do, which is very different to kind of the MetaDAO setup, is we ask them to tell us, if this project receives this funding, how much of this metric do you think that they will actually achieve? So we're asking for a number, right? We're actually asking for a number. We're not asking for like a yes or no. We're saying like, what do you think this will achieve? And what that does is it tells us, it gives us this like distribution. Like most people think that this project's going to achieve 50, and some people think this project's going to achieve 35. So pick 50. 50 is good, more of the good. So that's the difference. And I think, again, the design space is basically infinite. You can come up with all kinds of versions, but this is the one that we're working on.
Awesome.
So just add to that, because I still don't understand how it works. So like, okay, I have this grants proposal. So, you know, I'm building this public good. I will achieve new infrastructure layer, which is open source, in 2 years. And now Leo is coming in as a trader, and Gideon is coming in as a trader. And Leo is putting like, Punkar doesn't know anything about this. Like, it's like barely 20%. And Gideon is like, I believe in Punkar a little bit, so I put my money, and it's more money, onto 80%. So now we have like, let's say that's the market. So now we have like a little bit more on the 80% than 20%. Okay, what's happening now?
So that is one of the options, is to fund this infrastructure project.
Yep.
Let's say that the question is not should we fund the infrastructure project, it's shall we fund this infrastructure project, this one, or this one, or this public good, or this public good, or this public good. And so then we would ask the markets as well what they think of the other options. Like, so imagine we were to fund this project, infrastructure project, how much of this metric? So we know from this market that there's a lot of money, right? A lot of stake is on, and again, the stake doesn't have to be actual cash, right? It can be like play money or whatever, but there's a lot of signal on this, or stake on this, like 80%. And if the 80% is higher than the amounts in the other options, then it means that we should absolutely pick like this project, the one with 80, right? Then we will automatically give the funding to this project. They'll get the funding, they'll start working. And at the end of this period that we care about, right, when the markets actually end, we're going to check the metric. And the metric determines whether Gideon, his 80, actually gives him back the money. And if he's wrong, then he doesn't get it back, right?
Wow. This is crazy, because like, if I think about it, like those projects will be like maybe not a years, but like it will be little long term to hit at least some of the matrix. So it's like a very long term bets. Is that correct?
Depends on the metric. You can
Okay.
design the metric, right? So, and you can design the project. So you could say, we care about, we could say you care about small projects with simple metrics. You can say you care about huge projects. You already have metrics and you care about the marginal difference, the incremental improvement over a period of time, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. So you don't necessarily, it's like being able to take the thing that sits at the heart of innovation in the entire capitalist ecosystem, which is like we fund people, we give them money, and we buy equity, and then equity is this container. And equity, if you do something of value, it accrues more value, and so you're buying some of that. That the project takes the funding, and then it goes and builds something, and then it grows the value of the overall pie, and your little equity container gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And this is great, and everybody loves it, and this is funding so much innovation across the world. The problem with that is that we don't have a similar one for public goods, because public goods, there's no equity in public goods. So you can't really make money from it because people don't necessarily pay for public goods. Imagine we could take the same container and we could just get rid of the like equity part. I mean, instead we could put any metric we want, and we could say, if this metric goes up, like you're going to get a greater payout, right? Whatever that is, like it's reputation tokens, it doesn't matter what it is, but that's going to go up. And this is really powerful because you have the same mechanism that's at play in the entire like capitalist ecosystem, but now for public good. This is what we're super excited about. But the idea is you design the container. So you decide the metric, you decide who gets to participate, and you decide like over which like period you're going to measure. But yeah, it's not as simple as equity. Equity is like a blunt instrument. It works really well in most situations, whereas not necessarily for metrics.
Yeah.
That's
I think it's a.
That's a very
Yeah.
sorry.
I would just one thing I want to say. It's like it's a nice segue for the live streams we have next week because Gitcoin will be on,
Yeah.
and we will be talking about Gitcoin grants. So just like if you are tuned in into this live stream, come next week as well because we will kind of continue this discussion about public goods and grants funding. And now back to Gideon.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by the metrics you use for success, right? So in this example of these projects that are vying for funding for the public goods that they're creating, I've worked a lot with government, and within government, at least since the 80s or 90s, there was this idea gaining momentum that government should be organized as like a company almost, and that certain metrics should start leading behavior of civil servants and public spending, for example, right? So, and one of the things that we found out in the past 30 years is that it's pretty hard to see the wellness and well-being of a society or ecosystem as just a bunch of metrics, right? So if you look at public safety, you could say, hey, as soon as we hit the metrics of X years of prison population stays or X dollars in actual fines that people pay, then that is a performance metric. It's an output metric, but it doesn't say a lot about the outcome that you're wishing for the bigger ecosystem and society, right? So there's been a lot of perverse effects by steering on just one or multiple metrics, which kind of took away the bigger holistic picture. So I'm very curious how you can design your metrics in such a way that yes, they are measurable, right, and they lead to a certain outcome, but that you also take those secondary effects into account, and also maybe sometimes even immeasurable stuff, which might be very hard in Futarchy. But I'm curious what your take is.
I'm one of the most incredible things about Futarchy is that most of the answers to most of the questions we get are like already solved in the original paper from 2000, and it's actually in the title. So Robin Hanson doesn't say, hey, bet beliefs. He says vote values, right? He says, he starts with, we should vote values and bet beliefs. And I think that the idea, like the Godhart's law, right? Like anything that you, or Goodhart's, anything you basically measure, eventually you kind of, people figure out how to game. And so this is true. So we're going to set metrics, and this is what humans do. We set metrics, and then they work until they stop working, and then we change the metrics. So I think that the human component of Futarchy is never switched off. It's humans all the way down, right? We're setting metrics, we're participating, we're contributing our information to the markets, we're making a decision, we're looking at the decision and we're saying that was terrible, let's update the metric, this is not working anymore, and then we change the metric. So I think the argument is a really important one, that we shouldn't assume this is a machine that we can just like let loose and we're going to pick a metric and it's going to be the same metric forever, but it's going to help us like incrementally move forward. The main innovation, the main insight is just we can get a purer information signal from a large group of people if we use a market rather than if we use a vote. That's basically the idea. But we really want the vote. We want the vote to tell us, like, what do we care about? Like, we all care about metric A. Now let's ask what's the best way of achieving metric A, and we should ask markets.
I have a follow-up.
Can you tell?
Do you mind if
Oh
I?
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So one thing I think that's fascinating is that now, like, let's say Not Your Handle is running like a project very similar to Gitcoin, right? So now, like, public goods are tailoring their projects to be successful by the metrics they set, right? Instead of maybe tailoring them to Not Your Handle's biases, right? They know that Not Your Handle is going to review his application, so instead of tailoring to his biases, they're tailoring to the metrics of success. How are you going to plan to like scale? Because I think the key point one of the key points in your system is that the traders can choose between a certain amount of public goods, right? Like, how are you planning to scale if there's like 1,000 public goods applications to this one Futarchy example, right? Because would traders be able to take in all that information and then pick which ones they want to bet on? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And the answer is going to be very unsatisfying,
Okay.
which is we just like we just set the person who's deploying the funding. So I'm some ecosystem. I have this money. Maybe it's like $1 million I want to deploy, or like I want to give this to push some public good in some direction. I come up with some metric. I'm like, these are the things I care about. This is the money I want to allocate. Normally, I just have grants manager turn up, pick 5 projects, and fund them. Now I'm going to use my like conditional funding system, and I say, we deploy this system, and I'm going to give this, put the money in, and now people can turn up and they can pick, right? I can also set who can apply. So I could say there's a constraint on who can apply. I can say there's no constraint, like go for it, as many as you want. Now, obviously, the as many as you want thing is a problem because there's more information to process. And what will probably happen is people will look for other signals to reduce the amount of information they have to process, right? So they'll go on Twitter and they'll see what people are talking about, and they'll go find those projects, and they'll go there, or they'll look at the markets and see where the liquidity is, and they'll say, okay, well, most of the liquidity is here, here, and here. I'm going to go into those markets. And I think this is like, we obviously want to have some limit, but I would say that if you go and look at like retro funding, look at Gitcoin, there are tons of people applying to those projects. This is this exact same problem. But I think the way that we would solve it, I mean, we're just getting started, is we'd start like it really simply with a small number and just slowly increase as people get better at kind of, getting, more information and there's more people participating. And I would say that if you think about this as being a system that largely is full of just individual people on the internet who are just in their communities and they love their communities and they want to participate and provide this information, you probably aren't going to get someone who's going to spend hours and hours and hours going through loads of different proposals. But we've kind of solved this already, right? In traditional protocol governance or token governance, we have professional delegates. They are companies, they have people who are full-time looking at this thing, right? That really is that's running crypto today, right? These professional delegates. Professional like forecasters, there are people who would just think about these things, and if they can make a good return doing it, and it's worth their time. So I think there's loads of like, the design space is huge here. We shouldn't I don't think we're very constrained. As long as we can build things that are useful and we can get the right people in front of them, then I think we're going to have a good time, like really like shifting the conversation away from let's just vote with our tokens to like, hey, let's like really try and make good decisions that work at scale. And I mean, it's going to be incredible once like we have loads of systems that work this way, because they can speak to one another, right? Like we want to have one thing that decides something and it pushes out some public funding into another system, or 5 systems that also push out public funding. They can scale like horizontally, and I did vertically, but horizontally and then vertically. And so it could be really, really interesting.
and then we will get into AI basically betting on our behalf, so people don't need to be involved. I would
I
say
think it's already happening.
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah,
like
this
you
is,
said.
there are
Like
a few.
it's hard to process the information. Like we are not processing it anymore. It's just like you're saying like, hey AI, find 5 top projects and fund it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, no, but
yeah.
this
You can
is
imagine that. There's definitely a group of people already.
sorry, my audio might be a bit like lagging, so sorry if I cut you off a little bit. But yeah, like I think this is like interesting examples, like how we can improve the decision making. Like, do you see this being actually extrapolating outside crypto, or do you think like it's very much like I know like in general like the innovation it's like happening here and especially like the markets are here and everything, but like do you think or do you see some examples beyond crypto actually happening?
Um, it's a funny thing you bring up. I was on an AMA with Robin Hanson like 2 months ago. Like, oh my god, I'm so excited to meet this guy. I've been following his idea for 2 years, like my hero. And someone asked him a question and said, "Why do you think Futarchy's been picked up by people in the crypto ecosystem recently? And do you think crypto like uniquely enables some of your ideas like Futarchy to exist?" And his response was, "None of my ideas are uniquely enabled by crypto." And so that kind of broke me because I think they are, and I think the ability. I know Iwaki talks about this a lot, but the ability to raise funds quickly, and then the ability to pretty much tokenize anything enables this huge range of futarchies that have never been possible before crypto. That's my experience and that's my belief. But the creator himself said that it's not possible, so maybe I'm wrong. But he has joined he has joined a Futarchy project on Ethereum, so maybe he's coming around to the idea.
And sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, yeah, I
Go ahead.
think that the I don't think that Robin, if you asked him today, he might change his mind. I think that he's slowly learning why why crypto has. I mean, if you're deep in crypto, you have a really good sense of like why it works really well. I think if you're outside of it, it's quite hard to perceive why we just look like we're running around building random pieces of software and getting really excited about things that the rest of the world doesn't really care about. But I think that over time you can see, I think you're right, the points you make are really why it is enabled uniquely within crypto. However, I think the ideas of Futarchy, I think this is his point, they are useful outside of crypto. And I actually feel like the main reason why it works in crypto so well is that we haven't got these entrenched institutions that we have to fight against. Like we're talking about, like we're replacing what is effectively the governor contract. It's not owned by anybody. Nobody's precious. Nobody's going to turn up and fight us if we try to replace the governor contract, right? It's like open source. You just go and fork it, you use it, great, like works well. And whereas if you try and go up against like Capitol Hill, you go and try and build something that's going to replace government, I think that's a huge, like it's hard to improve government. The systems are like sturdy by design. They're not supposed to be changed very often. So I think that's like just that point there is like underappreciated, I think. So yeah, I do think it has these ideas could definitely spread beyond crypto, but I don't think that that's the goal. I think that they are uniquely enabled by crypto because we have these like open spaces that are like not owned. Actually, they're common spaces, right? They're owned by all of us. And I think if we get these things right, it just enables crypto to grow faster. And if it grows faster, it will mean that it's crypto that's doing some of that public goods funding elsewhere. It's crypto that's making some of those decisions elsewhere. And I think that it's more that our space will just intertwine with those other spaces rather than they get adopted outside of crypto, if that makes sense.
Also,
Yeah.
just want to say, no one here is going up against Capitol Hill
Wow.
on the eve.
Speak for yourself. Well, I just want to say, like, we had actually Matt from Network Stay Connect last week, and I like this kind of segue. Like, something is happening in crypto, maybe in DAOs, then like it might get adopted by network states, which is like larger, piece of like real estate in a sense, and then it might get adopted later on by the regular government as a innovation. So they're like there might be steps. So it's very easy to do it now in DAOs and like crypto on the small scale. Then network states like the bigger scale, and maybe the Capitol Hill will be like in 10, 1500 years from here. Um, but we have one question from the audience, so I would love to actually answer that. So the question from Matthew is: would people be forced to bet? Leo, do you want to start? Are you forced in MetaDAO to bet?
I'm not. And you can just buy Meta on your favorite Solana DEX of choice and hold it. And if you believe in the project and you believe in the power of markets, then it might be a really good investment to just buy Meta and basically delegate your voting power to traders that might be smarter than you. If you think you have an edge, then you can bet and make money. If you don't, then just hold Meta and let the markets decide for themselves, and let the better traders who do have an edge make the money trading the markets. That's how I would look at it in MetaDAO. And in fact, for the first year, I just watched the markets, watched the proposals trade, and recently, like 6 months ago, as I started trading them, and yeah, participating in that.
Awesome. And what in terms of the marketing of this idea, right? So if you want to spread the Futarchy message, one of the things that immediately popped up in my head was the magic moment that prediction markets are having right now, right? So Polymarket basically calling the decision that would be made in the elections, right? The election outcome already weeks ahead of the actual event. So there's this great, let's say, popular imagination moment right now about betting on outcomes. And now these are big and external outcomes usually, but I've seen bets on very obscure things as well. So can you leverage that popularity in a certain way and kind of latch onto that as Futarchy and say, hey, by these same mechanisms, we want to actually govern more and more things?
Yeah, the interest in Polymarket is obviously incredibly timely, I think, for everyone working in our space. The thing is, the last election, Polymarket was also there, right? So there is something particular about this moment. And I think Vitalik really nailed this with his info finance piece. And he said, look, people are just realizing that we wake up every day and markets give us all this information. We kind of underappreciate how valuable they are. And what's crypto full of? It's full of markets. It's full of people who are constantly contributing information about very local communities, local ecosystems, things that most people don't care about, right? There are things happening in crypto that you once you close your laptop, you walk outside and no one cares. These are things happening on the internet. And I think this is incredible because I think it gives us this free design space. And I think that Polymarket definitely have legitimized this kind of info finance world, and definitely believe that there's a clear opportunity to make some really, transparent, very well understood decisions and governance decisions in crypto, specifically because this has happened, because more people are now going to believe in it. And belief is definitely part of it, right? Like, vote values, bet beliefs. So I'm going to need people believing.
Okay, so
I
I
do
got one
think,
more.
I just want to say, Gideon, I think
yeah.
it's a good point that you bring up, because I do think it's the biggest hurdle.
Mhm.
Like, for the markets to be efficient and useful, they need more participants. And so that's what's talked about
Right.
constantly in MetaDAOs. How do we get people to use the platform? And so I think it's good to bring up, because that's probably the biggest barrier is participation.
Right. And talking about MetaDAO, right? And you mentioned earlier, Leo, I believe that the volume of decisions being put up for a vote is relatively low, or at least by your own estimation. Yeah, I saw a number in the low tens, like 20, 25 proposals being put up for a vote in the most recent period. Punkar and I have been teaching that DAOs are these terrific decision-making machines which can continually govern and have this continuous flow of engagement and people deciding on things together. Should we revise that idea, or will DAO and other of these Futarchies eventually pick up the pace of governance, or is that something, as you maybe hinted at earlier, that is specific to Futarchies, that there is a different pace? And maybe to follow up on that, if that is the pace, does that make for a functioning organization?
I think it's a feature, not a bug. We were having a discussion, I was having a discussion with someone in MetaDAO about redenomination. And there was 3 alternatives proposed. And there was people making good arguments for each alternative, basically redenominating the token to a higher value. So instead of having 1 meta for $1,000, I would have 10 meta for $100. That's what we were talking about. And there was a lot of good discussion around it, but I think there wasn't one clear alternative that was the next best alternative. And so therefore there's a lot less noise with governance proposals, because unless there is a clear alternative that makes MetaDAO better or increases the token's value, then you're not incentivized to make a proposal. And so in that way, it cuts down on an issue I think a lot of DAOs face, is too many proposals and a lack of quality proposals, because people who are making these proposals and providing the liquidity for them are incentivized to do a good job and hopefully have their proposal pass. So I think it's a feature, but I think it's a good point that you bring up, in that maybe there's other organizations that might not need Futarchy, or maybe Futarchy needs a subcommittee that's supposed to make quick decisions, kind of like what MetaDAO has, so they don't have to do a proposal for everything.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yeah.
Is a system better because we make more decisions or less? And I think that this is we wouldn't be able to measure the success of a DAO by the amount of decisions that it's actually processing, because if we've designed an organization well, you know, like I don't necessarily believe this, but Bezos' idea that like meetings indicate that you've already lost, like no meetings. I don't know if it was Bezos, it might be someone else. But meetings bad. Meetings mean you've already failed. You've already failed to design the right communication structure. And so I think, honestly, I don't think this is more decisions is bad. I'm just saying, I don't know if that's necessarily a good measure. Like DAOs could be excellent if they have no decisions. Maybe the best DAO doesn't have any explicit governance. It's just so well governed that you don't need to design this like explicit system to ask everybody what they think, because everybody always feels like they're contributing. They always feel like their points are heard, and if they need to, they just fork away and do something else.
Well, and because we have a Dutch person on the call, I think we need to end right now, because it's like top of the hour and he likes to be on time. So last quick question. You have like 10 seconds to answer. Where people can find you? Leo, you can start.
I'm at Leo Henkels on Twitter, Telegram, and Farcaster. Ping me on Farcaster. I'm more active there, and would love to chat Futarchy on Farcaster.
And I'm at @notyourhandle_ on Twitter, and you can go and find us at @butterygg.
Okay, and me, it's Punkar, and here is Gideon. You can find Gideon on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter, and you can also sign up for the next course, How to DAO, at howtodao.xyz, and you can also buy book about DAOs at howtodao.xyz. And I think I'm on time, so thank you, and see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.